The phone felt like dead weight in my hand. I stared at the screen, breath coming shallow, the eerie words still echoing in my head. Stay away from Logan. I swallowed hard and checked my call log, fingers trembling slightly. The number was gone. No record of the call. Like it had never happened. A cold, unsettling chill ran down my spine. I turned toward the door. Logan had left barely a minute ago. The air still held his scent, a mix of faded cologne and something distinctly him, something that stirred old memories I wasn't sure I wanted to revisit. I ran a hand through my hair, pacing. My mind screamed at me to piece this together logically, but logic had nothing to do with what I was feeling right now. Fear. Confusion. And underneath it all, something more dangerous. Longing. I hated that it was still there, like an open wound that had never fully healed. After all these years, after the way he left me, why did he still have this hold on me? And more importantly, what had he dragged me into? I sank onto the bed, exhaling sharply. Who the hell was after him? And why? My stomach twisted as I replayed the look on his face before he left, the hesitation, the flicker of something he wasn't saying. I had seen that expression before. Back then, before he disappeared. I clenched my fist. He had lied to me before. He had kept secret. And when things got too complicated, he ran. So why was I even considering going after him now? I should listen to the warning. Stay away. And yet, something in my gut wouldn't let me. Because despite everything, I still cared. I squeezed my eyes shut. I had spent years trying to forget him. Now, in a matter of hours, he had thrown my life into chaos again. I forced myself to take a deep breath. I had two choices. Ignore the warning. Find Logan. Get the truth. Pretend this never happened. Walk away before I got pulled into something I'd regret. My pulse pounded in my ears. I already knew what I was going to do. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. Because no matter how much I resented him, I needed answers. And I wasn't letting Logan disappear on me again. The night air was crisp, but my skin burned with tension as I stepped out onto the street. My instincts screamed at me to turn back, to let Logan deal with whatever mess he had gotten himself into. But my body moved before my mind could protest, drawn forward by something deeper than reason. I scanned the empty sidewalk, my heart pounding against my ribs. Logan was nowhere in sight. My breath came out in sharp bursts as I jogged forward, my eyes darting between the neon-lit storefronts and the shadowy alleyways stretching into the unknown. Then, in the distance, I saw him. Logan was moving fast, his shoulders hunched, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. He glanced over his shoulder, the nervous motion sending a spike of adrenaline through me. He wasn't just walking away, he was running from something. I clenched my jaw and picked up my pace. He disappeared down a narrow alley. My pulse thundered in my ears as I reached the entrance, pausing just long enough to second-guess myself. The alley was dimly lit, the glow from a flickering street lamp casting long, restless shadows against the brick walls. A single breath, and then I stepped in. I hadn't taken more than 3 steps when movement in my peripheral vision made me freeze. A sleek black car had rolled up to the curb across the street, barely making a sound. The windows were tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. Then, the driver's window rolled down just an inch. Someone was watching me. I couldn't see their face, only the silhouette of a figure sitting unervingly still. The seconds stretched, each one thick with unspoken threat. Then, as silently as it had come, the car peeled away, vanishing into the night. A cold knot twisted in my stomach. I wasn't just following Logan anymore. Someone was following me. I exhaled sharply and forced my feet forward. Whatever was happening, I wasn't backing out now. I found Logan leaning against a graffiti-streaked wall further down the alley, head bowed, lost in thought. His arms were crossed tightly over his chest, like he was trying to hold himself together. I stopped just a few feet away. "Who the hell is after you, Logan?" His head snapped up. For a moment, I saw something raw in his eyes. Regret, maybe. guilt. But then he masked it, jaw tightening as he glanced past me, checking for threats. Go home, he muttered. I stepped closer. Not happening. You show up out of nowhere, break into my apartment, and now I'm getting warned to stay away from you? No. You're going to tell me what the hell is going on. He let out a bitter laugh, rubbing his temple. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Try me. Logan hesitated, his fingers twitching at his sides like he wanted to run again. Logan, I said, voice lower now, steadier. If you're in trouble, just say it. He exhaled shakily and ran a hand through his hair. I'm being hunted, he admitted. By people who don't just let things go. The words settled over us like a dense fog. I swallowed. Why? He hesitated. Then, reluctantly, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, sleek USB drive. I stared at it, confused. What is that? The reason I'm being chased. He turned it between his fingers, his expression unreadable. I stole something, he finally said. Something big. Something I wasn't supposed to see. A cold dread unfurled in my chest. And now the people who own it want it back. I exhaled slowly, trying to wrap my head around this. Jesus, Logan. I didn't have a choice. That's bullsh*t, I snapped. You had a choice to come to me. To tell me the truth. Instead, you broke into my place and dragged me into this mess without a second thought. He flinched at that, and for a moment I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, so softly I almost didn't hear it, he said, I came to you because I didn't know where else to go. Something in my chest clenched. His voice was rough, edged with something that sounded dangerously close to desperation. My anger wavered. I wanted to hold on to it, I needed to, but the way he looked at me, like he hated himself for needing me, made it impossible. I took a slow step back, dragging a hand down my face. This is insane, I muttered. I know, he admitted. And now I'm in danger too? His throat bobbed as he swallowed. Yes. F***K. Silence stretched between us, thick with everything left unsaid. Logan shifted on his feet, gaze dropping to the ground. I'm sorry, he murmured. The words felt too small for everything that had happened. Too small for what he had done to me years ago. But for some reason they still hit something deep inside me. I hated that. I shook my head. Sorry isn't going to fix this. He nodded, jaw tight. But I need to know one thing, I said, forcing him to meet my eyes. Did you come back just because you needed a place to hide? Logan hesitated. Then, quietly, he said, No. The answer sent a different kind of chill through me. Before I could say anything else, a noise behind us made us both go rigid. Footstep. Slow. Deliberate. Getting closer. We weren't alone. The silence between us stretched, thick and suffocating. Logan's fingers curled tightly around the small object in his hand, his knuckles white. I knew whatever was on that drive was the reason everything had spiraled into chaos. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to speak past the tension coiling in my chest. What's on it, Logan? He hesitated, his gaze darting toward the mouth of the alley as if debating whether to run again. But this time, I wasn't letting him go without an answer. Talk to me, I demanded. You owe me that much. His jaw clenched. Then, slowly, he held out the USB drive between his thumb and forefinger. The tiny device seemed so unassuming, yet I knew it carried something deadly. I didn't mean to steal it, he said, his voice low, almost hoarse. I wasn't looking for trouble. But I found something I wasn't supposed to see. I exhaled sharply. What do you mean? Logan ran a hand through his disheveled hair, eyes flickering with something between regret and fear. The people after me. They're not just some street gang. They're powerful, influential, the kind of people who don't exist on paper but run everything behind the scenes. My stomach twisted. And you crossed them? I had no choice. His fingers tightened around the USB. I was working a side gig for a guy who, let's just say, deals in information. I was supposed to grab a simple file, nothing major. But then I found this. He lifted the drive slightly. And the second I realized what it was, I knew I couldn't leave it behind. I narrowed my eyes. What's on it? His throat bobbed as he swallowed. Names. Transactions. Evidence of deals that aren't supposed to exist. Corrupt officials, high-ranking criminals, people who have built their lives on making sure the truth never sees the light of day. If this gets out, it could ruin them. A sick feeling crept into my gut. And now they'll do anything to get it back, I whispered. Logan nodded. The weight of it settled in my chest. This wasn't just some petty theft. Logan had stolen something that could take down people who operated above the law. People who didn't play fair. People who killed to keep secrets buried. I took a shaky breath, about to press him further, when a loud crack split the air. Gunfire. The alley exploded into chaos. The unmistakable screech of tires. A black car skidding to a stop at the entrance. Doors flew open, and men in dark clothes and masks stepped out, moving with terrifying precision. The glint of gunmetal under the streetlights sent a fresh wave of fear surging through me. Run, Logan hissed, grabbing my wrist. We took off just as bullets slammed into the brick wall where we'd been standing. Adrenaline surged through me, drowning out everything but the sharp, instinctual need to survive. My feet pounded against the pavement as Logan yanked me through the maze of alleys, our shadows stretching and distorting under the flickering streetlights. More gunfire. A bullet ricocheted off a dumpster inches from my shoulder. My breath came in ragged gasps as Logan pulled me around a sharp corner, and suddenly, we were sprinting down a side street. I could hear them behind us. Fast, relentless. We weren't outrunning them. Logan shoved me toward a chain-link fence. Climb. I didn't think. I just moved. Fingers slipping against the cold metal, I hauled myself up, my muscles screaming in protest. Logan was right behind me, and as we scrambled over, another gunshot rang out. I hit the ground hard, pain jolting up my legs, but there was no time to recover. Logan pulled me up, and we ran. An open street loomed ahead, too exposed. We veered into another alley, diving behind a row of dumpsters. We pressed our backs against the cold metal, chests heaving, hands shaking. Footsteps thundered past the entrance to the alley, and I held my breath, heart slamming against my ribs. I felt Logan shift beside me. His body tensed like a spring about to snap. Then, silence. The footsteps faded. For now, we had lost them. But it wouldn't last. I turned to Logan, still panting. Tell me we have a plan. He hesitated. Then, we don't. We didn't stop running until our legs gave out. Logan yanked me down a side street, and we staggered toward an old, abandoned building at the edge of the district. The place was a decaying skeleton of what it once was. Broken windows, graffiti-stained walls, the faint scent of mold thick in the air. But it was empty, and right now that was all that mattered. Inside, the silence was oppressive, broken only by the ragged sound of our breathing. Logan pressed his back against the wall, sliding down until he was sitting on the grimy floor. I stayed standing, arms braced against my knees as I tried to calm my pounding heart. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Logan exhaled shakily. I'm sorry. The words barely registered. My mind was still spinning, trying to make sense of everything. The gunfire. The masked men. The USB drive that could apparently get us both killed. I squeezed my eyes shut, fingers pressing into my temples. I don't even know what to say to you right now. Logan nodded, but I could see the weight of guilt settling deeper in his expression. I didn't mean for you to be involved. I let out a bitter laugh. Yeah? Well, here we are. Logan pushed a hand through his damp hair, glancing toward the shattered windows. His posture was rigid, shoulders tense as if he were expecting an attack at any moment. I swallowed past the lump in my throat. Do you even have a plan? A long pause. Then, quietly, I know someone who can help. I turned toward him sharply. Who? Logan hesitated. Then he pulled out a battered burner phone from his pocket, his thumb hovering over the keypad. I frowned. Who the hell are you calling? Logan hesitated for only a second before pressing the call button. The line rang once, twice, before a familiar voice answered on the other end. Logan? My entire body went cold. That voice. I knew it. No. David. I sucked in a sharp breath, my chest tightening. Logan knew David? My ex-David? What the F*** K? My voice came out hoarse, barely above a whisper. Logan's gaze flickered to mine, something unreadable in his expression. He didn't look surprised. If anything, he looked like he had been dreading this exact moment. I felt like the air had been punched out of my lungs. David, I repeated, my voice shaking. David's voice crackled through the speaker. Who's with you? I clenched my fists, my mind racing. This didn't make sense. Logan had vanished years ago, and David had. Oh God. I stared at Logan, realization dawning like a slow, sickening wave. You knew him before me. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. And Logan's silence was confirmation enough. My stomach twisted. David had always been secretive. Even when we were together, there were things he wouldn't talk about. And now, suddenly, he was involved in this? I had spent so much time resenting Logan for disappearing. Now I was starting to wonder if I had spent years with someone else who had been lying to me all along. My voice came out colder than I intended. How long have you and David been working together? Logan exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. It's complicated. I let out a hollow laugh. Oh, I'm sure it is. Logan looked like he wanted to explain, but before he could, something outside the building made both of us freeze. Footstep. Slow. Deliberate. My breath hitched. They had found us. The footsteps grew louder, echoing through the empty building like a countdown to something inevitable. Logan tensed beside me, his breath sharp and unsteady. We both knew there was nowhere left to run. Get behind me, Logan muttered. I ignored him. Not happening. He turned, his eyes flashing with frustration. They're after me. They're after us now, I cut in. So stop trying to play the hero. Before he could argue, the door burst open. A rush of cold air swept in as dark figures stepped through the threshold, their heavy boots crunching against the debris-covered floor. Shadows stretched across the walls, their silhouettes stark against the dim moonlight spilling through the shattered windows. Logan stiffened. My pulse pounded in my ears. One of the masked men stepped forward. And then, slowly, deliberately, he reached up and pulled off his mask. I felt the floor drop out from under me. David. He stood there, perfectly composed, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. Miss me? He asked casually, tilting his head. I couldn't breathe. The memories crashed into me all at once, every late-night conversation, every moment of trust, every time I had thought David was someone he wasn't. You, I rasped. You sent that warning. David chuckled. Of course I did. He glanced at Logan. But you didn't listen. Logan's entire body was taut, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. Why are you here, David? His voice was low, dangerous. David sighed, almost disappointed. I told you both to stay out of this. He gestured toward the USB drive still clutched in Logan's hand. But you just couldn't let it go, could you? Logan's grip tightened. You work for them. David smiled. I work for a lot of people. I shook my head, disbelief and betrayal knotting in my chest. All this time. You lied to me. David's gaze flickered to mine, something unreadable passing through his eyes before it vanished behind that infuriating smirk. You were never supposed to be involved. He exhaled, then lifted a gun from his holster and pointed it directly at Logan. My heart stopped. Hand it over, David said smoothly. Logan didn't move. Logan, I whispered. David's finger hovered over the trigger. His smirk faded. Last chance. For a moment everything was still. Then, black.